Well, thanks, Restless Hearts, for tuning in today. I have a really profound treat, even if it's predominantly just for me, because they're two people I respect very deeply. Like when we were working through this, like when I was trying to like line up guests for our summer lineup, I'm like, who do I want to talk to about questions that I care about? And the two guests that I have on today are two of those people. These are two dear friends of mine, Dave Wilton and Latifah Alattas. Is that how you say it? Like I've never had to ask you that.
Most people never say my last name. Alattas. Like albatross. You know.
And we all go back. We all lived in the like Boulder, Colorado area together years and years ago. And there was a community of people out there. Like for me personally, as I was like going through a bunch of deconstruction and damage that helped put me together. And Dave and Latifah were part of that crew of people. So their songs are super meaningful to me, and their art is super meaningful to me and my family. Like I'm pretty sure most of your guys' music is still essentially what we listen to in our house to this day. So you guys are the best. I'm so excited to ask you guys questions. And so you guys want to just real quickly introduce a little bit about yourselves, what you do, what your journey has been, and then I'll ask you some questions.
Okay, Dave's pointing at me through Zoom. I am Latifah Alattas. I have a few different artist monikers. The two that I actively still put music out under are Moda Spira and Page CXVI, which actually a lot of those records I worked on alongside with Dave. He was my co-producer. So it's actually really fun to be on the call with Dave. I'm also a producer and an engineer, songwriter, and I live in Nashville, Tennessee now. I moved away from Colorado about 3 years ago almost, which is crazy now.
Yes, that's awesome. Yeah. Awesome. How about you, Dave?
I'm Dave Wilton, and yeah, it's a joy to be with you, Garret and Latifah. I also have some music that I put under different moniker band names. One is called The Boy and His Kite, and Latifah has helped co-produce all of that work with me as well. And one of my like most long-standing and also like one of my favorite collaborators that I've had in my life in regards to
Ditto.
And then I'm in a band called Loud Harp with my friend Asher Safink from Salt Lake City. Besides doing my own music, I also produce records, and I'm an engineer, run a studio here in Lafayette, Colorado. And yeah, that's what I do.
No, you guys, yes. I remember, so for a hot minute when I came out of college, I was like thinking I wanted to go into worship music. And I remember walking into church one day and it's like David Asher like playing. And I'm like, I need to rethink everything.
I give up.
No, it's not fair. Like I was also like going through a bunch of other things, but yeah, seriously, y'all, if you guys, everyone listening to this, Page CXVI, Moda Spira, all like Boy and His Kite, Loud Harp. If you are listening to this in the Ecclesia community, like our faith community up here in the Pacific Northwest, we had Loud Harp come out a little while ago, and it's still like one of my favorite memories.
That was so fun.
It was so much fun. It was great. Yeah. We had so much fun. All right, so here's the premise of what I wanted to talk to you guys about. I think right now there's, for a lot of different cultural reasons, people are trying to think about how to process reality. Like there's so much that frequently is happening in their worlds, both personally, culturally, and they're looking for whatever sort of resource that they have that they don't presently have in order to think through these. And so when I was thinking about that, I think that artists and musicians are in a unique position to help all of us like think through what's happening, because that is a habit that y'all just do naturally, whether that's in your personal life or you're helping other people do it. And so I think the primary thing I wanted to just ask is a set of questions that you as artists, how have you essentially leveraged your art to process like multiple different elements of your reality, the things that you've experienced in your life, and so that we can hopefully glean a little bit about how we can do that from a stream of thought that maybe we're not all that immersed in. And so those are some of the questions that I need to know, because there's so much happening all the time, and I respect you guys and I want to hear. Okay, so here's the first one. So how has your vision of Jesus changed in the midst of your pain and doubt? I think that sometimes a lot of like the artists thing is like they talk about sad things a lot, and so I wanted to create an easy on ramp. Like I don't know, like one of my favorite like artists right now is Julian Baker, and she like writes all like, but I'm just like, sometimes I'm like, I saw her that she's in a very happy relationship right now, and I'm like, oh man, is your record gonna be good? Sorry, that's mean, but like, that's like the thought that goes through my head. I'm like, no, I want you to be happy. Be happy. Anyway, so I wanted to know, just as you guys have experienced pain and doubt, and as you follow Jesus, how has your art helped you process, and what did it unlock for you, for how you understood that? And so we'll go with Dave first, because we'll go with Dave.
Dave, you got to tell him who you ran into when you were here.
Did you run into?
So we're grocery shopping at Aldi, me and Allie, for the rehearsal dinner for Latifah, and I look up and I was like, oh, that person has like a bomb and all, like left leg tattoo, you know? And I was like, oh, that's Julian Baker. So she like walks by me, and I was like, hi, Julian. Just want you to know, I think you're awesome. And I really appreciate your music. It's a gift to the world. Please never stop. And she kind of like, it was super awkward, because I mean, she was very sweet. It was actually a tender moment. But I could tell that, like, in Nashville, that's like, you don't do that.
You don't.
Famous people. But I'm not from Nashville, so screw it. I could do whatever I want.
You nailed it. You nailed it.
So she kind of like bent down, and she is like very sweet, very kind. She
that's incredible.
And so I just met her.
Hey, you in the grocery store.
She's like getting like cheese and salami, and then like here's this sweet, gentle giant.
Totally. She's really short, and I didn't want to come across this because I'm a tall guy. So I like crowd down, I like crouch down, and I'm like trying to talk to her at like her level, which is very awkward for me because she's so
the way Gandalf talks to Frodo in Lord of the Rings.
Totally.
Dave, that would happen to you. Like, I feel like that's a very, like, anyone that knows Dave, like, he just like all of a sudden just meets people and then becomes like he becomes their Yoda. Like, it's just an incredible thing.
She was very sweet. You could tell she was like not interested at first, but kindness can go a long way, guys.
There you go. All right. Incredible.
Oh man. Okay, so jumping right in, just shallow stuff like pain. So, I think that okay, like there's something that art does that allows people space. I was just reading in scripture this morning about in like John chapter 8, and like there's this mob of people ready to kill this woman who's caught in adultery, and rather than like, and everyone's in a weird frenzy, kind of like anti-vaxxers at the moment, and Jesus doesn't say anything. He just like bends down and starts like messing in the sand,
Yeah.
And like even that little image of like just taking a moment to like direct people's focus away from wanting to murder somebody is really helpful. And it gives like a space for contemplation, for people to allow their emotions to catch up with reality. And of course, Jesus then says like, hey, how cool. Anyone without sin, cast the first stone.
Yeah.
And he's able to say something, having like that pause, that moment of contemplation gave listeners a bit of healthy tension.
Yeah.
And I think art is supposed to be this place of holding space and holding a safe space where people can ask the questions that maybe they can't ask in normal life. One of my favorite mixing engineers, so I draw inspiration from a lot of different streams. So if I quote loads of people, or paraphrase, because I'm not super great at quoting, but there's this guy, Chad Blake, who is a wonderful mixing engineer. He mixes a lot of things that I love, but he always talks about his love of fantasy. And I know Latifah can relate to this with me. I have a deep love of storytelling and science fiction in particular, because it's amazing the stories that people can say when it's 1,000 years in the future and 1 billion light years away. All of a sudden, they can touch on things that are so true, that are happening to us, but we feel somehow removed from the pressure, the anxiety, the pain, the stress of our current situation, and seeing it from a different, fantastic, a fantasy point of view allows us to actually see ourselves. It's a beautiful mirror that we can learn from. And so art to me has that ability to, in some sense, be another perspective that we can see ourselves and see each other and see how we relate to each other. Just like that moment, that pause of Christ, with a mob like that. It's supposed to hold some tension, but it's also supposed to show us ourselves. Some of the most sacred places on earth, the oldest, most ancient sacred places on earth are like old caves.
Yeah.
And it was where humanity first voiced something and heard a response, and it was such it filled this incredible longing in humanity, so much so that they felt the divine, and they realized, oh, there was a connection to the supernatural, to the things that are natural, that we encounter every day, that in our materialistic culture and world we sometimes don't give space for.
Totally.
So in regards to pain, I think some people, if I'm honest, are just wusses and don't understand the difference between pain and longing. They don't understand the difference between, they don't know what suffering actually is. And so I don't want to belittle anyone's pain or suffering, but to think that we can live life pain-free or suffering-free or even longing-free is, it's just not true.
Yeah.
That's a false reality, in my opinion.
Yeah.
One of my mentors, he's a blind Jesuit named Larry Gillick, and he says, there's a built-in loneliness in everything.
Yeah.
Everything is meant to be a graceful disappointment, so that everything is an invitation to know that everything isn't God.
Man.
So that is not like fun news for our culture.
Yeah.
Because we want to be God. We want to have all of our longings fulfilled, like in an instant. If I want food, I hit Instacart. If I want some weird thing, I get on Amazon, I get it. But Gillick and the Jesuit tradition teaches that humanity is incompletable, that we're designed to find completeness only in the one being that is complete, gratitude,
Yes.
and that is God. Paul, like paraphrasing here, but he talks about I found the secret to contentment. I think that's a crappy translation. I think what he was talking about is like gratitude. I think God is everlasting gratitude. To fall asleep at night and to give thanks as to participate in the divine nature of God. And even amongst pain and suffering, I find that art allows me to be grateful.
Yeah.
It allows me to be grateful for relationships, for the goodness of creation around me, the goodness of humanity around me. And if any point in my life I choose to focus too much on, or there's not a healthy balance of gratitude and suffering, then we need help. Then we need to reach out and ask other people to come and support us and remind us that we have a lot to be grateful for.
Oh man, Dave, let's go. That was profound. Thanks, man. How about for you, Latifah? How's I know that's part of your story and your journey. Anyway, so I would love to hear about what you learned in the midst of how you've created art in that.
Yeah. I put out a record 5 years ago now. called Divorce, and and Dave produced it with me and spent a lot of time and sat through a lot of tears and laughter, actually, because usually if you hang out with me, you know that I will cry and laugh in the same 60 seconds very deeply. and I have discovered, I think it was, maybe I heard it first from Brene Brown, and I don't know if she was paraphrasing somebody else, but that the opposite of joy is not grief. The opposite of joy is fear. And so a lot of people think that, oh, grief's going to rob me of joy, but it's fear. And I would even argue shame, which is attached to fear, pulls us out of the experience of joy. And so like, I think that music for me personally, as an art maker, as a music maker, as a songwriter, has been a vehicle for me to dive deeper into what I'm actually feeling. It's almost like the spoonful of sugar that helps the medicine go down.
Sure,
to use a song to talk about songs. But that's wow. But anyways, I think that the first thing that came to mind, Garrett, when you posed the question, was that like music is something that helps me drop into my body. So like a lot of people, when they hear music, even without lyric or like a vocal, will feel the rhythm of the drums or the low hum of the bass or the high frequencies of an acoustic guitar or whatever it is. And it inspires movement in the body. And it sort of like has this like mystical way. And I have a lot of ideas, I know Dave does too, about light and sound and the divine, like permeating these like cell barriers like in our bodies that like help to like shake things up. Yes. And I think that a lot of time, and this is something I've experienced personally as well, is that when I'm experiencing pain, and I don't know if it's because I've grown up in the time, like in modern time, as well as in the Western world, my instinct is to want to escape it or numb it. And so the idea of like leaving your body, mentally, spiritually, when you're experiencing pain, is because it's like, I want to avoid that because it feels bad.
Yes.
Or it feels hard, might be another word. And so what I love about music is it drops me in my body. And if I'm in my body, then I'm going to need to experience what's happening in my body. And if that is sadness or pain or fear or shame, I have found that avoiding things usually makes them grow, but tending to them, like actually, or nurturing them, actually like helps them like dissipate or like metabolize is probably a better word.
Yeah.
And so, there's a lot of studies, like if people are familiar with the book, The Body Keeps the Score. If anybody's into therapy in the last 20 years, you've probably read it. Yes. It's the idea that like we hold trauma, stories of trauma or pain in our body. And that can become a lot of different things. And so addressing trauma, addressing pain, really allows us, sorry, I got a phone call. I'm the worst right now. It allows us to let go of narratives that are not true of us, narratives that aren't the story that God has woven into our DNA, which is that we are loved, we are made in the image of, and that we are like gifts and stewards of like what is like a beautiful creation that is all mirroring the beauty and the power and the majesty of the Creator. Yeah. And so all that to say is that like when I made my divorce record, like I spent about a year writing songs and working on music, sometimes by myself and a lot with Dave. And it helped me metabolize real-time trauma and pain. Yeah. And what's really like this, I just thought of this as we were discussing it. I was listening to Dave, is, I don't carry the same weight of emotion when I like hear like when I heard Bang on that podcast from the record, I wasn't like catapulted back and I'm feeling all the same feelings at the same level. Yeah. What's kind of cool now is it's become this like tombstone that I visit, and I have like things to like honor and celebrate. And it's like a timestamp. It's a witness in the time that it's happening. And I can like, it's this marker I can go back to and think, wow, like, look what I came through. Like, look what community helped me through. Look what God helped me through. And it's this like, it's an Ebenezer, if you like hymns,
no,
right?
Right?
Like,
that's right.
Right. And so, I think that like music is profound because it has a way of getting a lot of people into their bodies. And the thing that comes with that is presence, right? We're not like living in the fear of the future or dwelling in the trauma of the past. We're presently in our body and saying like, what is happening? What am I experiencing? And can I let it flow through me? Can, like, with the help of the Spirit, honestly, like, I think that God runs absolutely through all of us. And like, and it's that grace that helps us metabolize pain. And, so yeah, it helps me not avoid my suffering.
Yes.
And I think that that's what's been so profound and why, like, I literally need it. And this will be the last thing I say, but it's like in Chinese medicine, lungs are where you carry grief. Right. And I think one of my favorite things about being a singer, and one of the things that's been particularly hard about the COVID season, is that I'm not singing hardly as much anymore. Like, my tour got canceled. I'm just like not actively singing with people anymore. And when we sing collectively, it's really powerful, but it literally rattles our lungs. And if that's holding grief, imagine what that's doing to help shake up, stir, and metabolize, right? Like, sound can literally break glass. So why do we think that it can't shatter fear or shatter grief? Or, you know what I mean? Like, yes. It's pretty powerful when you like really think about how cool that is, you know? And like, and that's the stuff that like can make my mind run forever. But, yeah, that's the long answer.
No, I love that. I love everything you said. Like, going off that, Latifah, is like, I was thinking that, you know, so interesting. Like, so like the word for like spirit, God's spirit, right? Obviously y'all know is ruach, it's breath, you know? So like, if the spirit is the active agent of healing and transformation, the thing that gives power, the same power that rose Jesus from the dead resides in us to bring us out of death. Like, that, a lot of that resonates so much. I mean, like, in even like in ancient Hebrew thought, like the idea being like the same word for soul oftentimes is nephesh, which could also just as much mean throat or stomach or guts, you know? So there is this very like bodiness to ourselves that I, particularly in like Western Christianity, I think, who's like, perhaps we haven't done enough to like unroot the idea of like Gnosticism, this dualism between the body and the spirit that doesn't exist in the biblical world, really. And because of that, we think of we have to do a version of reintegration. And what I hear you saying is that what art has helped you, what music has helped you do, is create containers that you get to reintegrate that which wasn't separated, but has been shown to you as separated. And so you more so just opened your eyes to the reality of what actually is occurring, and then been able to label it as such.
Yeah, man.
I think that's pretty profound. And so I think for like everyone that's listening is the idea that like I'm getting is like, what kind of ways, what kind of spaces can we create that help reintegrate that which was separated? And maybe it is art, maybe it's poetry, maybe it's gardening, maybe whatever those spaces are that create the space, create the container for that stuff to come together. I think that's really profound and beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. So coming on the flip side of that, where like Latifah, you were saying like for you, laughing and crying are like really happen in the same moment. How has art and your guys' process as artists, like how does joy play into some of that in the midst of grief, in the midst of the pain, but also like making fun songs that people want to dance to, you know what I'm saying? Like, so how does joy, what have you learned in the role of joy is in leveraging, in making your art?
Dave's pointing to me.
Yes.
Well, I mean, confession, I'm really bad at making happy music. But I love listening to it and I love dancing to it and I need it.
Yes. One thing I love about following Latifah is a great social follow also. I mean, Dave would be too if he posted more, so I'm just publicly shaming him. But like one of my favorite, like you have all these dancing videos. And so that when I was thinking about it, I'm like, I want to know like what is that about? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's just like, it's so fun to like express and move and shake. And like, I mean, there's even like a lot of like somatic body therapy, right? It's about like attaching your body to the experience of the emotion. And it usually requires some movement or some acknowledgement. And so dancing is like another really just powerful form of expression. The Bible talks about dancing a lot, you know? But yeah, I honestly like as a producer, as a musician, as an art maker, I'm so inspired by people that create like quote unquote happy art, you know, because I actually think it is really challenging. One record that I think actually does it really well is the Go record by Yonzi. Like it's really, and it's very like, it feel like it mimics a lot of creation. Like he used a lot of like nature elements in his live show, like for his visuals and stuff. I love that stuff. But then it's like, I mean, honestly, man, it's not like the lyrical content is like really pulling me into joy, but like anything dancey, like Katy Perry, it's like candy pop. It's like, it's all good R&B. You know what I mean? It's just like, it's giving us something, you know? And I think for me, what it gives me is like the impulse to absolutely move my body and to like shake it out. Just, you know, a little T Swift reference. So, or shake it off, whatever that is. I sometimes like I try to like write songs like that as like an experiment, but I actually just yesterday wrote my first authentically sweet love song. And it's because I'm like very much in love with my new husband. You know what I mean? It is real sweet, so much. But it's like, it still sounds like a melancholy Japanese house song. But the lyrics are happy. So you might want to get another artist or producer on to ask about this question. But I mean, the truth is, it's for me too, it's just like a nod to the fact that we need each other. Like we can't get all things from one person. Like there's a reason why there's so much diversity and variety and different kinds of thinking and sounds and people and culture. I think there's purpose and intention in the way like the divine created all of us. And it's that like we have different sounds and rhythms and expressions of music and art that like help round out like the fullness of the experience, you know? So, yeah, I would just like to basically default and say I'm really grateful for the artists that can deliver on that kind of musical content.
Really. I mean, and I've also been in like I remember when you and our friend Aaron Strumpel were like, I like stopped by real quick because I already moved out to Colorado and you guys were recording one of his records, but like you run a really fun like production room. I was like so like there's like even in the midst of the sadness, like learning to have joy in the midst of that allows you to like maybe use your language a little bit, like metabolize it. And I think that you just kind of intrinsically know that.
Oh man. I mean, you got to like die on the sword of your own ego, like first in order to make other people comfortable to like make fools of themselves. And once somebody leads, then everybody's like, oh, I can be an idiot too. Or like, I can fail in front of you. Or like, there's this one moment in the studio with Dave where we were working on his record. And I was like, dude, and I was totally sincere. I was like, I have the most banger background vocal idea. Just put me on the mic, Dave, you know?
Turn off the headphones.
Yeah. And like Allie's in the room, you know? And I'm like, and I'm thinking, here's my ego, right? I'm like thinking, ooh, this is going to be cool and special. And people are going to be like, wow, she's good. You know what I mean? And I start singing it and I get about a minute into the idea. And as I'm singing it, I realize this is like a Disney Princess Bride, terrible idea. And like, it's so bad that I just start laughing and everyone starts laughing with a sigh of relief. Cause Dave's like, oh good. She also knows it's bad. And like, I don't have to tell her. And it's like, what I loved about that is like, we, you know, in our creative family, like we have so much safety to fail in front of each other.
So good.
And instead of it having it like default on embarrassment, it's like, it's hilarity.
Yes.
Like it's so, and like, it just like, so really, I mean, that's about safety. And I have the same thing with Aaron, you know, like we accept one another, we care for one another, we champion one another. And so we can fail in front of each other. And we know that the other person isn't going to like cut us out of the project or like think we're terrible, you know? And so like, I like kind of intentionally, when I work with an artist, I will totally try ideas, even though I think this is maybe a bad idea, to even demonstrate the art of failing.
Yeah.
Because so many artists struggle with perfectionism and wanting to like out the gate, have everything be artistic and cool and moody. And like, I'm sure Julian Baker fails, but we don't know that.
Yes.
You know? Yeah. I mean, maybe she doesn't, but like, but like the art of failing is like a gift because it gets us out of our own way, you know? So I don't know what Dave, sorry, I've talked so much. I feel like you should say something.
It's perfect. I love everything you said, and there's not much I can add to it. I think like Latifah, I'm an artist that I love to be happy and to experience joy and celebrate, but it looks quite different for me, I think, than some of my friends. You know, I am a deep well of emotion, and but what I guess the word that I would use would be like, I experience joy and generosity. So like when I look at my kids, there's like a moment each day where they do something and like I have a hard time breathing and I make like a stink, like a, oh God, this is uncomfortable. And like, I feel like there's like an overflow, like what I experience of love for that little human can't be contained in my body, and it bubbles out and it like looks so dumb, but I'm like, and I can't breathe. Or like if I'm like fly fishing and I catch a fish and I'm like giddy and just like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. And it's so like in the moment and happy, like there's something that like comes from the inside out. And I think generosity, that would be my expression of joy. And what I get to experience in music is that everyone's talking, you know, shoot, I grew up in a beautiful Midwest, you know, and every sermon was like life application about like outward affecting the inward, outward affecting the inward. But I don't necessarily think that's the only truth. I think it can certainly affect, but I believe that the work of God in us is mysterious and wondrous and imaginative. And there's this crazy thing where I can't control the seeds of the Spirit and His kingdom that get planted in me. And all of a sudden there's a moment where it like jumps out,
right?
Or like love jumps out, or patience jumps out, or gentleness jumps out, you know, and joy jumps out. And to me, participating in joy at its most basic level is me participating in the generosity of God. And I get to be honest and have an authentic response. Like I love dancing at Latifah's wedding because I was celebrating her love to her husband, Lucas. And I was celebrating so much, you know, looking at my wife and seeing Latifah and Lucas, and then I get to then be mirrored my love and affection of my wife and see all these like, you know, people enjoying a moment of love and a generous moment of love, right? So yeah, to me, art is that overflow of generosity. So
yeah,
it's good. It's a good word, Dave.
That's a really, like, the thing that makes me think is that, like, obviously the way that I think most people try to at least market joy is like through a fleeting idea of happiness as like a as like a commodity you can purchase. And what I hear you both saying is that like joy happens within the, like Latifah, like you're saying, like joy happens in the context of safe friendships where you can like laugh at the wonkiness and the funniness and the failure of it, and just be like, you can laugh because you know it's not going to break the bounds. And like the idea of this overflowing generosity, like you don't like God's overflowing, like there's that is a gift, and like you can't commodify gifts. Like there's just, that's
it's
not
like instead of fearing criticism, you're met with compassion.
Yes.
And so there's all this room to experience joy.
Yes.
You know, and that's what I experienced in my community,
yeah,
which allows me to be this kind of like inside out human being.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's really important for everyone. Like, at least that's important for me to remember, is that like joy isn't a commodity that I can go out and purchase. It's not a commodity that is easily attainable. It's something that is cultivated, like Dave, you're saying, in the life of the Spirit of connecting with God in the context of your family and your friends. Like Latifah, you're saying similar things in the context of your community. That joy is like is a gift of God that's cultivated inside of spaces where God's presence can pour that out. And like we all know, God is free. Like God is free to act as God is free to act, which I think is profound. So I think the last question that I have for you guys before we can kind of turn the page is actually on that idea, Latifah, if you were saying like, what does it look like to help steward those kind of safe communities? And we were talking before we started rolling about, like, I was listening to the Broken Record podcast, which is Rick Rubin and Malcolm Gladwell's podcast about music, and they mainly interview artists and producers. But as I was listening to it one day, I was like, man, the role of so maybe that would be one thing. What's the role of a producer for people that are not familiar with it? But when you're talking about a producer who's helping an artist create something, like you're like helping them realize a vision of beauty, a thing that they want to say, and getting to the chorus version, not only in lyric, but also in aesthetic. And so you're coming along someone, and I just started thinking, like, man, what that is the life of the community of God, is like mutually coming alongside each other, understanding the particular gifts of the other, and creating a space to help do that. And so I wanted to just think through that process for you and hear what you do to help artists do that, so that I can think about like that as a pastor, as a leader, as someone that helps facilitate a faith community. Like, how can you teach us about what that looks like to do for our friends?
Well, there's a lot of listening and observing would be like, Dave, don't you think, like out the gate?
Yeah.
Like your artist shows up and has a story generally attached to the songs, and then they actually have music and melody and lyric. And I just want to hear all of that first. I want to hear their heart. I want to hear what they want to communicate. And then I want to be paying attention to everything they're doing in between what they're saying. You know what I mean? Because like, people tell you the truth, like without their words all the time. That's something I've learned the hard way, but in a good way, and like, and I think that like, the very first thing is listening and observation, like without question, when you're producing an artist. Otherwise, you're just going to put out your own record with somebody else's voice on it. And like, I don't want that. Yeah. I don't need more of me. I'm already doing my own records, It's like, I don't want to put out something that competes with me. No, I'm kidding. What if they're a better singer?
Yeah.
That's a deep rabbit hole.
Exactly. That's the first thing I would say. Like, what would you say, Dave, after that?
Yeah, I think that exactly that. It begins. It's funny because I do have it. Latifah and I both get to meet with like artists from every different phase of life, both in their career arc as well as age and skill level, you name it. And what we have to cultivate is a safe place. I think, firstly, that someone can like come, and whether it's in a studio or a coffee shop or something, that when we look at them, we have they're not an object that we're trying to wring for profit. We're simply, can I help this person?
Yeah.
And I think that posture of care has to be like equally joined with curiosity. If I'm not curious about someone, I'm not going to be able to help them.
Right.
It's like if they play me a song and I'm like, I got nothing, like, then that's like, I will lovingly be like, I don't think I'm the person to help you.
Yeah.
But when someone tells me a story, or their personality, and when we're hanging together, if like my imagination is like fireworks happening, and I have like immense amount of curiosity towards what it is they're trying to say, then that seems like a worthwhile journey for me to go on with them.
Yeah.
And Latifah she was the first person to kind of teach me too, that like the artist is always the boss. And yet we as the producer get to always offer our opinion, our strong opinion,
right,
but with thoughtfulness, with kindness, with intentionality. And so, to be honest, producing is like, half of it is maybe music stuff. Like we're like, oh, I'm good with melody and engineering, and I like capturing sound. That's just half of our job.
Yeah.
Maybe less than half, if I'm honest. Because that's the thing. There's this diminishing returns. Well, whatever. Like the arc is, the better you get at your job, like the more nice gear you have, the less you have to work. It's like, it's so weird. Oh, a nice mic, a nice preamp. I don't have to do as much. It's like, it just sounds good. Cool. But it takes a while to get to that point, but then the rest of the 50% is, I'm a professional friend, therapist, encourager, accountability partner, conversationalist. Oftentimes, it is a blurry line of where it's just a hard job, just like a pastor. You're trying to literally lead people into a pasture of God that they can find nourishment and healing in. We're trying to lead people into a pasture where they can fully express the very best thing of their heart to share with humanity.
Right.
And so we have to be curious enough to help highlight, I think this is beautiful in you. I think this is fascinating. You should share that. Why are you scared of that? We ask way more questions than what we say. So that's, be leery of any creative person who offers answers more than questions. They tend to really hurt a lot of people, and I much prefer to partner with people that are way more curious and have a healthy relationship with certainty, meaning you can be certain of very few things.
I mean, I like that. The other thing I was just thinking about, Dave, was like, I have been really lucky that, the first, like Dave was the first artist that asked me to like co-produce a record that wasn't my own record. And like he believed in me and he wanted help and he like took a risk, and like I basically grew up in audio with Dave and our friend Aaron Strumpel. And then I made a record out in Nashville. I made a friend of Jason Lenning, who's an amazing engineer and producer out here, who's still, him and his wife and son are good. Like, they're like family to me out here. And and Jason grew up behind the board because his dad, Kyle, has been like Randy Travis's principal recording engineer and producer and a lot of big country records. And his whole family's involved. And the one thing that's a little, there's a good and a bad. Like the good thing about like Logic being affordable and like everybody be able to set up their own shop and build their own studio is that like we get to hear more interesting music. Like the gatekeepers have like become less powerful, right? Which is like really good for culture. It's good for society. The flip side of that is we have a lot of young producers coming up that have no mentorship and no friendship and no community in their craft. And so like, actually my husband's also a producer. And so like, we can like commiserate and also encourage each other. And like, I called Dave just 2 days ago and I was like, dude, here's this thing that's going on. And like, I told Lucas to call you and like, I want to talk to you about it. And like, he had some really good insight for me.
Wow.
And like, and I was just thinking about how like, when we are isolated in our craft or our service. So like, I think of like you and I were talking about that Mars Hills podcast, and like, we see pastors rise and fall, or like anybody in any job, presidents, governors, whatever. When you're isolating yourself in your act of service, I think there is real risk to becoming narcissistic or myopic or like self-centered or like confused about what you're offering.
Right.
And like for me to have like people who are peers and people who are ahead of me, like I think Dave is ahead of me in many ways still, like as an engineer and a producer and a songwriter. And I admire him so much. And like, there's other things I can offer Dave, I won't point out the things that I'm better at than him, but like, I just don't do it, Dave. I'm just joking.
Yeah.
that was like a ego stroke there. But anyway, so like, don't do it. Resist.
She knows all my weaknesses.
I feel like it has tempered me in a really good way. And like, I remember having a conversation with Aaron Strumpel on that record that you're referencing, where I was very strong-minded about something specific, about this one acoustic guitar on the record. And he had the courage, because of our friendship, to tell me the next day that he felt bulldozed. And it broke me in a great way, because I was like, I love this person. He is my friend. And I really admire him as an artist and also as a producer and an engineer. And so like, when you really respect the people you're working with, it's a game changer. And so like, that was, like I said, like my failures and my pain have been some of my greatest teachers. And like, and I think it's tempered me as a producer, as a caregiver, and as somebody that's really in an act of service in an industry where you're caring for people. And I think that really does mimic pastoring in some ways. And so like, having peers and having mentors who are ahead of you, like I was in a room with Lucas. We co-produced an artist, Carly Bannister, who's amazing. Her dad is Brown Bannister, who's produced Amy Grant and like Mercy Me and all these huge bands. And Brown came and sat in the room with Lucas and I when we cut vocals for Carly, and his demeanor, just literally sitting in a room with this guy who's been doing it 30 plus years. I was like, I'm learning from you.
Yes.
Like, and it just made me want to spend more time like with people. And Dave got to do this thing called Mix with the Masters. I'll let him tell you about it. But like, it's just, it really community. I can't believe we keep coming back to this, but I'm also not surprised.
Yeah, totally.
It just matters in every facet.
Wow.
Like it matters in the service of the work we do. And it matters in the experience of being able to like inhabit our own pain and our own bodies. Like we're just not meant to be isolated.
Right.
So anything that pulls us out of isolation is pretty powerful, because God, I had somebody tell me, it was a Methodist woman a month ago. She said, I believe the greatest sin is the sin of disconnection. Like disconnecting from God, disconnecting from the earth, disconnecting from the community, disconnecting from yourself. And I was like, ooh, I'm going to have to chew on that for a while.
Yes.
Like what we've discussed today, what it really boils down to is like trust and vulnerability, like with ourselves, with the divine, and with our communities, to say like, do you receive me? Like, do you hear me? Do you see me? And like, do I see you? Do I hear you? Do I receive you? Like, and are we reflecting like the image that God has put in us that reflects the Creator? Are we reflecting that to each other? Because if we let ourselves do it, we have the courage to take the blankets off our mirrors and put them in front of each other. Like, it's pretty hard to like hurt the person in front of you, because you're seeing yourself and you're seeing God. And so like, that's really powerful.
Absolutely.
And so like, I mean, I just love seeing Dave on this call, because whenever I see Dave, I like get really joyful, because I think about the 10 plus years we've had of not just making music together, but like grieving things together, like, celebrating things together. Like, and it makes me really, really joyful. And like, yeah. So it's just like, man, being with people, that all boils down to that. It's just being present with each other. Like that's what matters. And that's what music helps us do sometimes,
That's so good. Well, thank you guys so much for like giving your wisdom and your experience. Like, I feel like what I got to do, you know, like those late night conversations after you've had a good meal and there's like Dave poured you some good scotch and you just like sit and like
the
talk
best
for a while about like
man.
things. I just feel like I got to like hang out with you guys after a moment like that. So thank you so much.
You're a good hang, Garret.
Happy birthday, Garret.
Oh,
Every listener of this podcast, please send Garret a gift.
Yes.
Yeah, like Amazon gift cards, Target, maybe just cash. Just send
Just cash. You can
send
Venmo
something
me.
in the mail. Buy him records.
Yes, I do have a vinyl habit.
That's awesome.
Well, thanks you guys so much. We appreciate it.
Thanks.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, like it, subscribe to our channel, and turn on notifications so you can stay tuned for all of our content.